So without further ado, let's get things started today with our keynote speaker. Shawn Khalifa is an author, a playwright, and a self-identified overcomer. He is here to share with you all today a message about positivity. So everyone, please join us in welcoming my dear friend, Shawn Khalifa.
Hi, everybody. It is absolutely amazing that we could gather here today, even though it's a Zoom session. We are so fortunate, and I just have to give deep gratitude to the native peoples who land where we live. I always got to do that before I speak because we're blessed to live here, and I just want to give them recognition that we live here on their land. So to begin, my topic today is going to be on unconditional positive regard. And there's a really significant reason why I chose that. And there's a significant reason why I'm so honored and grateful to be in front of you speaking to you today. When I was a teenager, younger than most of you may be now, I was 15 years old, I lost my life. And I will explain to you how that happened and why. But first, let's define unconditional positive regard for those of us who are unfamiliar with the term. So it was a concept developed by humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers, and it's the basic acceptance and support of a person regardless of what the person says or does, especially in the context of client-centered therapy. When I first found out about Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard and how it's applied to patient-centered therapy, a light bulb went off in my head. And I wanted to know, how could unconditional positive regard be applied to my personal life so that a psychologist may use it to apply it to a patient? How can I use it to apply it to a psychologist that I might be working with, to a patient I might be working with, to anybody I come in contact with, such as my mother, a family member, my sister, my significant other? So beginning to wonder and ponder on how I could apply UPR, unconditional positive regard, to my personal life, I went back and looked at societal structures where UPR is already in place. And that's what I plan to share with you here today. And for the first one, I have to take us to Pelican Bay State Prison. Pelican Bay State Prison. It might be shocking for some of you to hear, Pelican Bay State Prison, why would he be talking about that? Well, I was a resident there. So I was a resident there for over a year. And this is a great time for me to explain to you how I got there. When I was 2 months past my 15th birthday, I was smoking weed every day. My mother worked long hours in Los Angeles. I was living in the Inland Empire. So I was really trying to find myself as a 15-year-old. And I can say that I was lost without the proper adult and peer support and smoking marijuana and just lost, and my goals were all over the place. I didn't really have a path to follow that was going to lead me to much success in life. So ultimately, it led me to being around a burglary where some older kids in my neighborhood who were age 16, 17, and 18, they committed a crime. They committed a robbery. They harmed the homeowner. And I showed up to their burglary after the harm had taken place. And when I showed up, my rationality in my mind was, oh my God, somebody was hurt in this house. I need to get away from here. So that was my first instinct. And also they were yelling at me. They didn't want me to be there. So the older kids I was yanked in the house. So when I showed up to the house, the 18-year-old grabbed me by the shirt and yanked me in the house and started yelling, what are you doing here? Is this what you wanted to see? Like, why are you here? Because it was something they were doing. I didn't choose to be a part of their crime. So after he yelled at me, I ran to the kitchen and grabbed some candy. I left the house and I ran away. The first person I went to when I got home that night was my mother. I said, Mom, I seen something, and I tried to explain it. But as soon as I told her that I was at somebody else's house, she got angry at me. And she said, what are you doing at somebody else's house? You could get in trouble for that. And that response just backed me up. And I didn't want to share anymore with her. So that led to me being incarcerated and charged with first-degree murder, because based on California's felony murder rule, which was a law that was recently overturned, you could be convicted of a murder for a murder you didn't commit, as long as you were a part of the underlying felony. So I was now a part of the criminal justice system at the age of 15. I was tried as an adult because the law allowed them to do that at that time. I was direct filed to adult court, and No one ever asked my opinion on what happened because when the sheriff did go to speak to me, I didn't feel safe speaking to them. So I didn't open up. I didn't share to them what took place. So they prosecuted me to the fullest extent of the law. I was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for a murder I did not commit and for a crime I didn't want to be a part of. But that did not stop me from taking responsibility in my life for what I had done leading up to that point that even led me to that situation of being incarcerated. And I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by positive, supportive adults in the juvenile hall I was incarcerated at before Pelican Bay to change my life and get over the marijuana addiction because kids were still using drugs in juvenile hall. I did not. Kids were still being disrespectful in juvenile hall. I did not. I learned from the positive adult male role models and female role models that I had to counsel me in that juvenile facility. And it's something that you are so lucky to be here today and that we have this at Laura's house. You don't have to get to the point where I was to find this. And you are so fortunate for that. And we are fortunate to have you here. And I'm fortunate to be here. So when I arrived to Pelican Bay State Prison, I was in shackles, I was in chains, I was sick. You get locked in this bus, and being a convicted murderer, you get no compassion. Being that you're a 15-year-old, tries an adult, you get no compassion. You're treated like the worst of the worst. So I was shackled, locked in a cage, thrown in a bus, and I was taken over 1,000 miles away from home, far north. I've never been to Oregon, but this prison bus took us into Oregon and came down a river where I got car sick. I was puking in a bag. You arrive to the prison like you arrive to a dungeon, and you instantly get yelled at by the correctional officers. They tell you to look up, don't look down, and you have to. And if you would have to fear being beaten to go against their orders, so you automatically comply. It's like it's a shock to enter this world. But one of the most incredible experiences I ever had was when I arrived to my facility, which in California, Pelican Bay State Prison has our highest security level. So this is the place you imagine from the most intense prison movies. And when you arrive there, it was completely against everything I imagined. There was unconditional positive regard on a scale I never expected to see, and I haven't seen since that facility. When I arrived to my housing unit, the correctional officers had the utmost respect. They referred to me as sir. Anytime I asked them a question, no, sir, yes, sir. My peers on the facility, regardless of race, referred to me as sir. And anytime they asked me a question, they said, excuse me. And they were extremely polite. They would ask me, may I have a bar of soap? Or are you busy? Can you grab something for me, please? And then if you did, or even if you didn't, they would always say, thank you. So that level of gratitude and the root basis of that gratitude and level of respect was unconditional positive regard. And everybody was embodying that. So when you arrive to the highest security level prison in California, you're treated based on your ability to express unconditional positive regard and respect to everybody else, not based on your size, gang status. Those are all falsehoods that you learn in the community because you've never been there. And here I am going to prison for a crime I didn't commit since the life in prison as a child. I arrived there as a teenager at the age of 19, and I'm treated with the utmost respect. And everybody does it. And another example of unconditional positive regard in a prison would be years later. So that was 2008. So in 2017, in January, I arrived to a facility that was one of the lowest security levels in California prisons because I had earned my way there. And keep in mind, to help you follow along, I was incarcerated for a total of 16 years on a life sentence. So I earned my way to a lower security level after 9 years of surviving the highest security levels. When I arrived to this new low security level at San Diego State Prison, the R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility, the staff were behind us, administration were behind us. They were developing a program rooted in unconditional positive regard. That meant where Pelican Bay, your unconditional positive regard was a foundation of the gang structure and you had to follow it. At this new facility, the foundation was there was no gang structure. It was just everybody. So that means that regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, or crime, you would be accepted into this prison community. And we were able to accomplish that. So I arrived there in 2017, and I was so grateful to be released in 2020 in February. So I have been released for 6 months now. And on that facility, we created the state's first non-designated program facility. We brought together all races, all genders, all crimes, accepted everybody. We have a face-to-face college program, a music program, Jail Guitar Doors, and we have meditation. We painted the largest mural inside of a prison in the United States on our facility, and it was based in our basic non-judgment of others. So when we see somebody on the yard, regardless of thinking this person's a different race or this person committed a certain kind of crime, with unconditional positive regard, we're like, this is our fellow peer. So that's first and foremost. Where it goes from there is dependent upon where the person takes it. And even then, you can't judge them. I've been assaulted 3 times in prison, and I didn't retaliate by punching the person. And these were all 3 of my physical altercations in my 16 years in prison. The way I responded to the people who punched me was with unconditional positive regard. I asked them questions. So the first person who attacked me when I arrived to the adult system, I sat down at a table across from him and said, hey, why did you do that? Like, there was no reason for you to do that. And then he explained it was a mistaken identity. The second person who did it, he knocked my tooth out. And I didn't retaliate by punching him. I was able to calm him down and later sit down and talk to him and say, why did you punch me? And he said, I was hearing voices. So showing unconditional positive regard to my fellow humans, even if they hit me, and not responding in turn in violence, is a way that I've adopted unconditional positive regard into my character and my life. And I was able to exhibit even in the toughest circumstances where people can't even imagine getting punched and not retaliating, especially in a system where you're expected to do so. For me to have that ability and not judge those peers off top for what they did and dialogue with them is something we could apply to our everyday life. And I'm going to take you to the community now and explain that in July of 2020, I arrived here to Wesley House. I live at San Diego State University in a program called Wesley House. When I first met them, I told them, I was just released from prison. I'm a college student. You guys have housing. Would I be able to live there? They said, oh, sure. They said, none of that matters. I said, I'm on parole. They were like, none of that matters. We have a bed for you here at Wesley House. So today, after spending 16 years in prison, being deemed a first-degree murderer, all the way up until January of 2020, I was deemed a first-degree murderer and locked in one of our state prisons. And now, July of 2020, I was accepted to Wesley House, and that's where I live here today. I'm currently a sociology student I'm going to work towards my master's degree in sociology so that I can teach it. But first, I'm finishing up my associate degree for transfer. So I'm in this position based on the unconditional positive regard I experienced in prison and showed in prison. And despite what you see in Hollywood of prisons being like these heinous places on the parts of the residents, that's not our demeanor. And that's wouldn't be your experience if you went there. If you went there humble and were kind, you would get the same experience. And I share so much about prison because that's what I consider myself an expert in, because I spent so many years there and more of my life there than out here. But the way that translates to our community is whenever somebody who's homeless comes up to me and asks for money, I don't think this person's scamming me. That's not my first thought. My first thought is, clearly this person's working hard. They're standing so I'm using unconditional positive regard. They want help. They want money. They want whatever they need to make them happy. They're out here working for it. They're asking for it. It's something more than, a lot of us don't even ask for help when we need it. And they're out here asking us for something that they really want and need. So just off top, respecting that, I've assisted every homeless person I've encountered out here. And I spent a lot of my EBT money on them. So that's just the way I use UPR in my life. That was where I came from. That's how I use it today. I'm used to following up with questions, but today I'm just giving you a presentation on UPR. I hope that some of my story might inspire you, that whatever you're going through today now as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, you are so fortunate. You're not in a state prison. You have Laura's house. We're out here at the Festival of the Hearts. So enjoy the rest of your day and the event, and take care. And thank you for listening to me speak today.